Hi Year 9, hi Year 10. This time I'm going to do a slightly more complex product demonstration for you. I'm going to be doing a fresh pasta. Now I appreciate lots of you will not have a pasta machine at home. I do, but I only recently got one. You can use a rolling pin and I'll show you how to do it throughout the video. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm making a chicken and broccoli lasagna just for something slightly different. I know that most of you know how to make a bolognese, but obviously you could do all sorts of different changes. You could do a seafood one, you could do one with like a tomato sauce and roasted vegetables. There's lots of modifications you could make to it. I'd like you to try and make your own pasta because that's the element of skill in it. The first thing I'm going to do is make a cheese sauce, and this is the gelatinization part of it. First of all, I've got about 50 grams of butter in this saucepan. I'm going to gently melt that. It will burn if it's on too high a heat due to the fact that it's got a low melting point. So I'm going to melt that, and I'm going to make something called a roux, named after the Roux brothers in France, and they basically made this way of thickening sauces by using a very simple two ingredients, which is butter and flour. In order to make the roux, you need preferably plain flour, but you can use corn flour. It's a really good alternative and it's gluten free and it will thicken the sauce. So you can add corn flour to it. Once the butter has melted, you're going to add in the plain flour and you're going to mix it. The flour has to be cooked or it does have an unusual flavour to it. It does taste powdery and grainy and not very nice. So you do want to cook the flour out, we would call that process. So once that's melted, and sometimes I use garlic butter so that it's got a nice flavour, a nice garlic flavour to it as well. Again, a bit more expensive, but it is really nice. So the butter is melted. I'm now going to add in the same amount of flour to the amount of butter that I've used, so about 50 grams, until I get a paste. So I'm just cooking this for a minute, and it looks like this. Sorry, the angle's not great on it. It looks like a thick sort of paste in here. Once I've done that, then I can add in my liquid. Now, most of the time people will use a roux with milk because the flour can make the sauce a bit cloudy. So people generally don't use stock in it. I actually have a mixture here of milk and cream because it gives it, funnily enough, a very nice flavour and it makes it quite rich. I've been able to, I think along with everybody else who's discovered it, you can buy a UHT cream in the supermarkets. That's what I tend to buy, and it's not Elmley, it's one in a carton and it has a really long shelf life and you keep it in the cupboard. So that's what I tend to use now for cooking. You will notice that I've increased the heat now. This is so that I can bring it through the gelatinization process. So, liquid's added in. I'm using a balloon whisk, but a wooden spoon is absolutely fine. But the crucial point here is that you keep the mixture moving. So at 60 degrees, the liquid will start to become warm and the starch granules will start to take on some of the liquid. At 80 degrees, they are almost full. They've absorbed almost everything they can. And then at 100 degrees, they burst open, releasing starch and thickening the sauce. That will only happen at 100 degrees boiling point. So once the sauce is at boiling point, if it is not thick enough, you cannot then just add in a bit of extra flour to it. It makes it all lumpy. So what you have to do is make another roux and add the sauce into that roux to then go back through the gelatinization process. So it's very important that you know this so that you understand how sauces thicken. Now, flavours that can be used, I'm going to use some garlic. I've got my broccoli already chopped up and I'm actually boiling it. However, what would have been better is if I'd steamed the broccoli, obviously. Steaming is always a better way of cooking because it doesn't remove the water soluble vitamins, and in this case that would be our vitamin C. So if you can steam it, I use sometimes just a sieve. I've got a metal sieve or a colander and I put my vegetables in there and I cover it over with foil and I steam them on a double boiler with the water underneath. That's a really good cheat way if you don't have a fancy steamer. I don't have a steamer. So that's what I do for boiling up or cooking, the vegetables. But those vegetables could be replaced. I'm using broccoli because actually it works really well with this sauce and it works well with the chicken. So my sauce is starting slowly to thicken. If it becomes too thick, it's a very simple process of adding some more liquid to it to thin it out. However, do remember if you're adding cheese to it, as I will, then it will thicken the sauce as well. So remember that if it's not quite thick enough, you can thicken it sometimes with extra cheese. And if it's too thick, add a bit more liquid to it. Okay, so mine's just about gelatinised now. And then I'm going to show you how to make the pasta for the next stage of it. If you wanted to, I'm making even just a macaroni cheese, but it's the fact that you're making the sauce, you're making the pasta, and you're preparing. I've already chopped up my chicken into small pieces, but preferably deboning chicken, and then also doing some vegetable preparation. When you're preparing the broccoli, remember that the broccoli the stalk of it, the bit at the bottom, is very bitter. Try and remove that and just really use the top section of it. It feels at times it feels a little bit frustrating because you're chucking away so much of the broccoli. I'll just quickly show you my sauce is at gelatinisation point now, and I'll just show you what stage I'm at with this. So that's my cheese sauce there, bubbling away. I'll get the right angle. And I need to keep it stirring so it doesn't stick. That's very important. So, I'm going to pause this now. Next time you see me, we're going to move on to the pasta part of it. So I'll stop this now and we'll move on to the pasta. Okay, so moving on to the pasta now. In this bowl that I've got plain flour. However, the best flour to use is something called 00 flour, which is very fine flour, and it makes it a lot easier to get a lovely smooth pasta. If you can't get hold of that, I couldn't. Just use plain pasta. Plain flour is absolutely fine. Into this, I'm now going to add some eggs. The quality of the egg does matter. I'm using a free-range egg, so that I know that at least the quality, it should be slightly better, because obviously the animals were in better conditions, therefore the egg production is better quality. Organic would be even better, but it seems a very expensive egg to use on something like pasta. You then take a fork and you basically whisk the mixture in the bowl. Some people do it on the worktop if you're authentic Italian. I'm not, and I don't want to have to clean up all the mess, if I'm honest. So you start to mix it in. Now, the best method is to have the dough, you don't want it too sticky. Mine's a bit sticky, so I'm going to add in some more flour to it to try and absorb some of that liquid. But you definitely don't want it to be too dry. If it's too dry, then it's very difficult to knead it out. Now, when it gets to the point where it's quite thick, you can then start to use your hands in the bowl to knead the dough. Now, gluten formation normally is formed when we add liquid to the flour. I haven't really added a liquid, although the egg white is obviously a form of liquid. So there is a small amount of gluten that is formed, but nowhere near to the same extent as if you were making a bread dough. It is quite elastic nevertheless, because obviously we've used eggs in it. So I'll just show you now the consistency that I've got. And sometimes you get pasta that's sort of beautiful orange colour, and that's because somebody's used probably organic eggs where the colour of the yolk is much, much stronger. Once you've got it rolled out, and I'm just flouring every so often to keep it from sticking too much, and this would take normally quite a long time, we are stretching out those gluten strands while we're kneading the pasta, so that's making it much more elastic for me. Now, what we would normally then do is put it through a pasta machine. Now, I have a pasta machine here. When I put it through the pasta machine, it sort of does all the heavy work for me, because as it goes through, it stretches the gluten. I'm sure if you've got a pasta machine, you all know how to use one. And if you don't have one, as I say, a rolling pin, an empty bottle, anything where you can get a bit of pressure on it to roll it out will do the job. So this is, I'm going to do this for a couple of minutes and then I'm going to show you the pasta machine. So this is my pasta machine, and this is the handle that attaches to it. You can get attachments that make different styles and different shapes. I already made some pasta and I started rolling it out. Really important to flour the pasta machine, otherwise the pasta will stick to it. It's also really helpful if you have a second pair of hands actually for this. But we normally roll through like so, and then we move the little dial down a couple of notches to make it thinner. The thinner the pasta is, generally speaking, the nicer it tastes. Fresh pasta needs a fraction of the cooking that dry pasta does. So bear that in mind if you are going to be making the fresh pasta. Ideally what you would really want is, if you're boiling it, just a couple of minutes in the boiling water, and if you're baking it in the oven, also bear in mind that it doesn't absorb the same amount of liquid the way that the dry pasta does, so you do get a slightly looser lasagna than what you might have with the dry pasta. Okay, when you come back, I'll be assembling it all together. Okay, I'm doing really well today. I forgot to show you how to roll it out with a rolling pin. That's good, isn't it? So, I'm flouring the pasta, and what I do is, if I'm doing it with a rolling pin, I hold on to the end of it so that I can stretch it right out nice and thin here. Lots of flour again on the worktop to stop it from sticking, and just stretch that right out. All it is, flour and eggs, very simple. You can colour pasta, and people don't generally use food colouring because it's artificial and it's man-made. They tend to use natural colourants. So for example, they would maybe use beetroot for purple, or they would use spinach for green, or they might use tomatoes for red. So you can actually puree up fruit and vegetables and add it into the pasta and you can get some really crazy colours from it. So hopefully that shows you kind of how you can do this. I need to flour this again, but keep flouring and keep holding on and pushing the pasta away to get it as thin as you can. Okay, so to assemble it is layering it up essentially. So in this mixture here, I've got raw chicken and I've got my broccoli. I've also added in some very finely diced garlic to that as well. So that's my first layer down. Then I take the pasta and I layer this on top. Now, normally we'd have to be very, very careful about making sure that the pasta is all covered in the sauce, because normally if we're using dry pasta, this would have to be cooked by the sauce. And I've got somebody sneaking watching me at the moment while I'm doing this. And then I add some of the cheese sauce over the top of the pasta, making sure that I push it out to the edges and making sure the pasta's all covered over. And then we do our next layer of whatever mixture it is that you want to put on top. Again, pushing this out to the edges. It's such a good skill for the GCSE spec to be able to make your own pasta. That's what would be expected. They would never, you'll never get high marks using pre-manufactured pasta. You must use the make your own pasta. It's such a skill that they would expect for you guys to do. So last sort of layer for me, and the last layer is the one with just the cheese on the top, cheese sauce, and then maybe some grated cheese over the top of that if you wanted to. And then it's baked in the oven. Now, when you bake it in the oven, I quite like mine quite crisp, so I'd be looking for mine to be in the oven for anywhere between sort of 45 minutes and an hour. It's up to you how you like yours to be. Remember, nutritionally, this is a great balanced, especially if I hadn't used cream, actually quite a balanced meal. It's got your broccoli for iron and vitamins. It's got your chicken, which is protein, lean protein though. And then of course I could use skimmed milk or even soya milk to make my sauce. And then of course it's got the pasta and which is it for our carbohydrates. Again, I could have swapped the flour, to wholemeal flour. I actually quite like wholemeal pasta when it's in lasagna. So cheese on the top, baked in the oven. Give it a shot, try it using the rolling pin, as I say, I did it, and try doing the cheese sauce as well if you can, and make sure you answer the questions as always on the PowerPoint. So I'll be looking forward to seeing some of you in the next few weeks or so. Year 9, I'll continue to give you guys work, and I might even give you additional work on Show My Homework for over the summer, just to keep you going with it. I know some of you are really panicking, and I totally understand. Don't panic. We'll get up to speed, and it's not too much of an issue. And also when I see year 10, we'll have a chat about what we need to be doing and what we need to be looking at. Take care. See you soon.